Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Charles Allen, the Ward 6 council member and chair of the Council's Committee on Transportation and the Environment. Today is Friday, March 20th, 2026. We're meeting both in room 120 of the John A. Wilson building as well as over the Zoom virtual platform. The time is now 1:13 p.m. and I'm calling to order this public roundtable of the committee. Today, the committee is going to consider 5 measures: PR 26-482, the Green Finance Authority Board Monica Warren Jones Confirmation Resolution of 2025, PR 26-483, the Green Finance Authority Board Anthony Washington Confirmation Resolution of 2025, PR 26-485, the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors Rachna Bhutani Bhatt Confirmation Resolution of 2025, PR 26-486, the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors Vince McCone Confirmation Resolution of 2025. Is it 6 or 5?
It's 5. When
5, got it. And PR 26-487, the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors Jimmy Ortiz Confirmation Resolution of 2025. Chairman Mendelson introduced the proposed resolutions 26-482 and 26-483 at the request of the mayor on December 15th, 2025. PRs 26-482 and 483 would reappoint Monica Warren Jones and Anthony Washington, respectively, to the Green Finance Authority Board of Directors as individuals with experience in affordable housing or community development for terms to end on July 9th, 2029. The Green Finance Authority Board of Directors was created by the District of Columbia Green Finance Authority Establishment Act of 2017 to oversee the Green Finance Authority, commonly known as the DC Green Bank. The Green Bank was established to increase private investment in clean energy, clean transportation, clean water, stormwater management, energy efficiency, water efficiency, and green infrastructure projects in the district. The board is composed of 11 members, 4 non-voting and 7 voting members. The non-voting members include various government officials, such as the Director of Department of Energy and Environment, the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, or their designees. The voting members must be approved by the council and relevant to today's nominations must include 2 members with experience in affordable housing or community development. Turning to the resolutions appointing individuals to the DC Water Board, Chairman Mendelson introduced PRs 26-485, 486, and 487 at the request of the mayor on December 16th, 2025. PR 26-485 and 487 would reappoint Rachna Bhutani Bhatt and Dr. Jimmy Ortiz as principal and alternate members, respectively, of the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors for terms to end September 12th, 2030. PR 26-46 would appoint Vince McCone as an alternate member of the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors to fill an unexpired term to end September 12th, 2027. Ms. Bhatt is currently serving on the DC Water Board as a principal member for the district, having been first confirmed by the council in 2012 and again in 2014, 2018, and 2022 for full terms. Dr. Ortiz is currently serving as an alternative member for the district and was confirmed by the council to an unexpired term last year. He would be appointed to a full term if confirmed now, and Mr. McCone will be joining the board for the first time. The District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority, or DC Water, provides municipal water and sewer service to the entire district, as well as parts of Maryland and Virginia. DC Water is governed by a board of directors consisting of 11 principal and 11 alternate members. Of those members, 6 are from the District of Columbia, and no more than 4 of those 6 may be district government employees or officials. 4 members are from Maryland, 2 from Montgomery County, and 2 from Prince George's County, and 1 member represents Fairfax County, Virginia. The district's members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council. We have no public witnesses that were registered for today's roundtable. However, the committee will accept written testimony through the council's hearing management system at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings until the close of business on Monday, March 23rd, 2026. We are, however, joined by our nominees to the DC Water Board. So let me turn to our nominees. Before the committee today are Rachna Bhutani Bhatt, the current principal member of the DC Water Board of Directors, Dr. Jimmy Ortiz, and a current alternate member of the DC Water Board of Directors, and Vince McCone, a current advisory neighborhood commissioner and former acting secretary of the U.S. Department of Labor under President Biden. Our rules require, actually, no, we don't have to do that because you're not government witnesses. So what I'm going to do is turn to each of you for your testimony. And then after that, we'll turn to some questions. If I have any of my colleagues that join us, we'll do rounds of questions. Otherwise, it'll just be me, and I'll ask you plenty of good questions. But Ms. Bhatt, how about we start with you? Then Dr. Ortiz will turn to you, and then Mr. McCone will turn to you.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairperson Allen and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today as you consider my reappointment to the DC Water Board of Directors. I'm grateful to Mayor Bowser for her continued confidence in me, and I would be honored to continue serving the residents of the District of Columbia in this capacity. Since my initial appointment in 2012, serving on the DC Water Board has been one of the most meaningful public service roles of my professional life. Over more than a decade, I've had the privilege of helping guide an organization that is widely recognized as a national and global utility leader in quality, environmental stewardship, and utility innovation. At the same time, I have developed a deep appreciation for the complexity of operating a utility system that our residents depend on every single day, often without seeing the immense infrastructure and dedicated workforce behind it. As a Washingtonian, a Ward 3 resident, and a business owner who works in Ward 8, I experienced this city from multiple perspectives, and my parents live at the wharf. I understand the pressures facing families and small businesses. I understand how even modest rate increases can have real impacts, and I understand how essential it is that DC Water maintain the reliability and safety of our drinking water and wastewater systems. Throughout my tenure, affordability has remained at the forefront of my work, particularly as chair of the Retail Water and Sewer Rates Committee. The challenge we face is not abstract. We are responsible for maintaining and modernizing an aging infrastructure system, complying with federal mandates, and investing in long-term environmental improvements, all while being funded primarily by a limited base of ratepayers. Keeping rates affordable while responsibly funding critical capital investments is one of the most difficult balances we must strike as board. The recent Potomac Interceptor issue is a clear reminder of the reality of managing complex, aging infrastructure systems. It has underscored the importance of sustained investment in our assets. Responding to emergencies of this magnitude while working to shield ratepayers from sudden financial impacts illustrates just how challenging our stewardship role can be. I remain proud of the way DC Water approaches these challenges through transparency, technical excellence, and long-term planning. Our management team and Team Blue employees consistently demonstrate professionalism and dedication, often working under extraordinarily difficult conditions to ensure uninterrupted service. Their commitment to this city deserves recognition and support. In my professional career in construction, I have seen firsthand the importance of sustainable design, resilient infrastructure, and strong project oversight. I have also advocated for meaningful opportunities for local businesses and residents to participate in major capital programs. These experiences continue to inform my work on the board, where I ask tough questions, push for efficiency, and support innovation that lowers long-term operating costs. After more than a decade of service, I also bring historical perspective. I have seen leadership transitions, evolving regulatory requirements, major capital program milestones, and shifts in water usage patterns. That institutional knowledge allows me to evaluate today's decisions within the broader trajectory of where we have been and where we must go. It has been an honor to serve alongside such accomplished fellow board members and to work collaboratively with the council and the mayor's office. I believe deeply in DC Water's mission and in the importance of stable, thoughtful governance as we navigate the years ahead. Chairperson Allen and members of the committee, I would be grateful for the opportunity to continue contributing my time, expertise, and energy to DC Water. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Dr. Ortiz?
Good afternoon, Chairperson Allen and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Jimmy Ortiz, and I'm honored to be reconsidered for reappointment to the Board of Directors of DC Water and Sewer Authority. I'm grateful to Mayor Bowser for this nomination, and I appreciate the council's consideration. I've been a proud resident of Ward 6 for more than 25 years, and I have long believed in the importance of civic engagement and public service. In 2024, I retired from the U.S. Postal Service after close to 4 decades of service. I began as a night shift letter carrier and finished as the head of International Postal Relations Office. Through this experience, I developed expertise in operations, policy, customer service, labor relations, and organization leadership, along with a strong commitment to equity, access, and accountability in public service. Presently, I serve on DC's Water's Governance Committee and co-chair both the Human Resource and Labor Relations and Evaluation Committees. Throughout my career, I have served on multiple international boards and committees, including those affiliated with the United Nations. These roles strengthen my experience in planning, project development, diplomacy, and stakeholder engagement. In addition, I remain active in our local community and professional organizations, such as Prospanica, formerly known as the National Society of Hispanic MBA, the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, and Teatro de la Luna, which have reinforced my belief in connection between strong infrastructure and thriving communities. As both a global citizen and a longtime Washingtonian, I bring a broad perspective to this role. I have seen firsthand the impact of safe water and reliable sanitation can have on communities. I believe that access to clean water is fundamental to health, dignity, and stability. To me, water is not simply a utility, it's a human right. If reconfirmed, I will continue to work to support transparent and equitable governance at DC Water. I am committed to strengthening community engagement, supporting fair and balanced rate structure, and advancing initiatives that promote environmental sustainability, infrastructure resilience, and long-term planning. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I will be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you very much. And Mr. McCone.
Chairperson Allen and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Vince McConey, and I'm honored to be considered for appointment as an alternate member of the Board of Directors of the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority. I'm a longtime district resident and currently serve as chairperson of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 4E in Ward 4. Professionally, I've spent more than 3 decades in senior leadership roles across the federal government, including service at the Departments of Labor, Commerce, Homeland Security, Justice, and the Treasury. Throughout my career, I've overseen large operational organizations, complex budgets, and critical infrastructure systems that support millions of Americans. These experiences, combined with my long-standing civic engagement in the district, have shaped my deep respect for the institutions that deliver essential public services to our residents every day. I want to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to the mayor for this nomination, to the members of the council for your consideration. It is an honor to be considered for service on the board of one of the district's most important public utilities. Reliable drinking water, effective wastewater management, and the protection of our rivers are fundamental to public health, environmental stewardship, and the continued growth of our city. The district faces significant challenges and opportunities in the years ahead with respect to water infrastructure. Across the country, public utilities are confronting the realities of aging systems and the costs associated with modernization, resilience, and regulatory compliance. DC Water is no exception. The district has made major investments in recent years, including transformative initiatives such as the Clean Rivers program, which significantly reduces combined sewer overflows and improves the health of the Anacostia and Potomac rivers. At the same time, recent developments, such as the damage to the Potomac Interceptor, underscore the vulnerability of aging infrastructure and the importance of sustained investment, monitoring, and rapid response capability. Incidents like this highlight the complex operational, financial, and infrastructure challenges that utilities must manage every day. Ensuring the reliability and resilience of these systems while maintaining affordability for district ratepayers will require continued strategic planning, disciplined oversight, and strong collaboration between the board, DC Water leadership, the council, and our regional partners. Another issue that deserves continued focus is the long-term protection of the district's drinking water sources and the health of our rivers. Potomac River is the primary source of drinking water for this region, and protecting its watershed is critical not only for the district, but for the millions of residents throughout the metropolitan area. Likewise, the Anacostia and Potomac rivers are central to the environmental future of our city. Continued investment in stormwater management, wastewater treatment, and environmental restoration will remain essential to meeting federal clean water requirements and sustaining the remarkable progress the district has made in restoring those waterways. As an advisory neighborhood commissioner, I also see firsthand how infrastructure investments affect neighborhoods. DC Water has numerous construction and infrastructure projects underway across the city and in my ANC, many of which occur simultaneously within the same communities. These projects are vital and necessary, but they can create significant disruption for residents when effective coordination and communication are not prioritized as they should be. If confirmed, I will work constructively with DC Water leadership to explore ways to improve coordination and communication around construction projects so that residents may receive clear information and on the impacts in their neighborhoods, and that the entire process may be managed as thoughtfully as possible. My career is focused on strengthening organizational performance, improving oversight, and ensuring that public institutions deliver reliable services to the communities they serve. In federal service, I've managed large operational enterprises, overseen significant budgets, and worked extensively with oversight bodies such as inspectors general, the Government Accountability Office, and Congress. These experiences have reinforced the importance of transparency, accountability, and disciplined governance, principles central to the role of the DC Water Board. Equally important to me is the perspective I bring as a resident and community representative. Throughout my service as an advisory neighborhood commissioner and in other civic roles in the district, I've seen how essential it is that large institutions remain responsive to the communities they serve. Public utilities must operate at the highest technical and operational standards, but they must also remain attentive to the concerns and experience of residents across all neighborhoods of the city. If confirmed, I will work in this role with humility, independence, and commitment to constructive collaboration. I look forward to supporting the board's work and ensuring DC Water continues to deliver safe drinking water, protect our rivers, maintain resilient infrastructure, and do so in a manner that's accountable to the residents and ratepayers of the District of Columbia. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Excellent. Thank you, all three of you. I appreciate your testimony today. I'm going to begin with some questions which are just timely related to the interceptor break and spill. This is not an oversight hearing. We had that with DC Water, but it's still helpful to be able to get your perspectives as board members. So I'm going to probably focus the first couple of questions for Ms. Bott and for Dr. Ortiz, and then we'll come back, since you're not on the board right now, to some other questions. But I wanted to see if you could just help share with the committee a little bit about just what are some of the action steps you feel like the board has needed to take, kind of walking through a little bit of when the spill was first alerted and reported, to some of the actions the board jumped in on. I've kind of talked about this before. While our job is certainly to hold DC Water through oversight and accountability for the actions, when I went out and visited the site, I'm a big believer that two things can be true at the same time. I saw a DC Water that had mobilized an incredible amount of workforce, of materials to help work through and think through how to make this repair and get this done, which was completed just recently. And at the same time, have deep concerns about the environmental impact that is going to be lasting, not just through the repair of this pipe, but I think will be lasting for quite some time as the environmental remediation goes through. And you couldn't ask for probably a more complex set of situations between locations of Maryland, the federal impact, the impact on the district and our waterways, on Virginia waterways. So it is a complicated issue, but wanted to get your thoughts just as board members that had to wrestle with this. Can you walk through some of the ways in which you have provided some oversight and action as DC Water's had to respond to this?
Sure. And appreciate the question, and really appreciate the fact that you went out to the site and saw the tremendous effort that was taking place in terms of repairing the pipe and obviously starting the environmental remediation, which, as you stated, will go on for some time. I think when you first asked the question, the thing that came to my mind was exactly what you said, that this is a very complex issue with several important stakeholders. And one of the things that actually came up recently in a board meeting is the fact that our state stakeholders all have a lot of questions, and not competing concerns, but they all have concerns about their specific jurisdictions and issues. And lucky for us, the federal government has also come in to try and help manage the remediation effort with this, because there are so many stakeholders and because of the confluence of federal, Virginia, Maryland, DC. There were a lot of questions that were asked by a lot of different board members. And I think one of the things that's most important when you're on the DC Water Board is that you have a fiduciary duty to represent DC Water, right? And sometimes that's hard given what people's professional roles may be and where their personal concerns lie. But I think that as a regional board, we are asking hard questions for not just the regions, but for DC Water, and how DC Water was then going to react with all of its partners. I think for us as a board, right, we triggered an internal, obviously, investigation, third-party investigation, to make sure that there was transparency and very clear understanding about causation, and what efforts were taken. And I think that's one of the most important roles that we have as a board, is to ensure that transparency, that oversight, and ensuring that we're being responsive to all the stakeholders. So I think in board meetings, in the last board meeting, I spoke to my colleagues in Maryland and I said, I understand that you have a lot of questions, right? And I also understand that you deserve answers to those questions. And I think you should be asking them. And no one wants to stop you from asking them. And it also may take time to get those answers, because it's not just DC Water. It's a tremendous amount of players that are all taking their specific roles. So I think governance, transparency, accountability are all really important pieces of what the board is doing. And in this specific emergency situation, we have really pushed to have oversight and to look for transparency and understanding in what happened.
Dr. Ortiz?
Yeah, if I can, piggyback on that, transparency has been the most important part for us, to make sure that the community knows what happened, how we're going to remediate it, and so it doesn't happen again. I went to a couple of the meetings for our customers, the stakeholders, and I listened to what they were asking and brought that back to the board. This is something that shouldn't happen and hopefully never happens again. And to make sure that every customer and every stakeholder is, has assurances that we are doing DC Water is doing their very best to make sure that this doesn't happen again. But the importance of what this utility means to this community. So I think, if anything else, operationally, we've been looking at it, but I think our main focus has really been on this communications to the community, so they know what's happening from day one to this is resolved.
Thanks. Could you share a little bit more? When Mr. Gaddis and DC Water were here, they talked about the third-party investigation. I think that was one of the things I certainly heard from stakeholders they had kind of asked for. How do we know? How do we make sure there's kind of a third-party independent investigation? And I think the ability to say that the board had already acted and initiated that, I do believe gave some people confidence. Okay, that's going to be an independent investigation that can be a trusted part of the process. Is that the way the board views it? Is that it is independent from DC Water's internal workings, such that there's a arm's length independence, so that when they come back and report back to you, which I don't know when that investigation is supposed to be done, but when they do that, you're viewing that as an independent third-party review coming back and reporting to the board? Is that, I guess,
Yeah.
the question is, am I understanding correctly the intent of what the board's doing?
Yes. So my understanding is that third party is working with the chair, and has requested and received documents from DC Water. So there is probably some amount of questioning that is happening from the third party to DC Water. But our understanding from the chair of the board is that the chair is the one who went out, solicited the third party, and is managing that separate from DC Water. And I think that gives us confidence also, right, to make sure that what DC Water is saying they think happened is what the third party is also finding happened. And more than that, even the recommendations that come out of something like that and the investigation, I think, will be tremendously helpful. I think all three of us talked about aging infrastructure, and it is a real it's a real challenge, right? I mean, if we could have unlimited resources, we would be able to solve so many issues so quickly. And without the unlimited resources and, you know, the increasing rates for ratepayers, it really is a struggle. But yes, so to my understanding, it is an independent investigation, and that is the purpose of it.
Okay. And that tracks with my understanding as well, which is that DC Water's going to do their own internal investigation, of course,
Yes.
but this is an independent piece separate from that. Dr. Ortiz, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, and definitely. We're not only are we interested in what the third party is, and I'm confident that it is a third party, but the results, when they come out, the board wants to make sure that it is reported out to the community. Again, on that transparency part, that whatever it says, good, bad, or indifferent, our stakeholders, our ratepayers will know exactly what it is. So it's nothing, no backdoor stuff.
Okay, thank you. I agree with that. And do we have a sense of the timeline as to when we think that third-party investigation should be completed?
I do not, but can find out for you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. What have some of the conversations been like with the board, with you and your colleagues around, you know, in light of this, has it triggered a conversation around any type of reordering or reprioritization of capital projects or reevaluation of the assessments to then help rank and prioritize? Because I agree with you, with limitless resources, we'd be repairing and restoring all of it. Of course, we know we can't do that. So we're, DC Water, I believe, is trying their best to assess where risk may be and then try to prioritize their work. And that's part of what this investigation will look at, I think, is was that assessment accurate in this case or not, or were there external factors that played into it? But from the board's perspective, how are you looking at either questioning or reevaluating some of those assessments to then feed into the capital planning?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Obviously, the Potomac Interceptor repair was supposed to start over the summer, right? And unfortunately, we are at the place we're at, but we're in the middle of a budget cycle right now. And the budget cycle takes a really long time to prepare for DC Water. We go out to all the stakeholders, which is where we are in the process right now. We're going out to stakeholders and soliciting feedback. I think part of the discussion with DC Water and why they're doing both the internal and the external is to see if there was an issue with how prioritization happened in the past, right? Based on the data that we have, the cameraing, age of infrastructure, everything else. And so I think there probably will be some form of reprioritization that will come from the learnings that are occurring right now. So I don't think there have been some contracts that have started in terms of making sure that we have the right emergency contracts in place. But I don't think a reprioritization has occurred yet. I know it is in David's plan to make sure that the right projects are going to go in the right order. But I think the focus right now has been on the remediation, the repair. And so I think now that we are in March and the repair has taken place, I think that will be the next piece that the DC Water Management team is going to look at to make sure that the right projects are going in the right order.
And as a board member, we'll reassure that we'll have a voice in that prioritization to make sure that things that need to be done get done. Even after they present it to us, but I know as a board, we're very keen on making sure things get done. So
Okay. And then on the environmental remediation, this is one that's, I think, we're talking about the challenging of multiple jurisdictions. I do think this is one where we did not have great communications early on, and at times felt like contradictory type of information about exactly who's in charge of what and what does that plan look like. So when we think about the river restoration, the environmental remediation, I know I was disappointed and frustrated with DC Water, and I think others were too, that there was very little discussion around, we just read in the paper that there was a special use permit that had been approved and no one really knew what the plan was yet. To this day, I have asked, but do not know where the material is even being taken. It's just apparently we're removing things, but nobody knows where they're going. That hurts transparency when we're not able to understand what the impacted and at this point hazardous soil and trees and brush that's being removed from the site and where it's going. And especially as a community who just saw an entire east wing demolished and dumped on a golf course down in Haynes Point with no transparency, I think people can understand there's not a lot of trust right now when people say, hey, I'm removing things and I'm not going to tell you where it's going. That may not be fair to DC Water, but it's just the world we're living in right now. So the more that we have information and transparency, the more confidence we have of how we're approaching something like this. And when I hear other river stakeholders, I get a really strong sense of just a lack of trust in what that remediation looks like because there was no draft plan brought to them to get their feedback on. So how is the board evaluating or looking at what that remediation plan could look like, should look like? I'm going to assume there's no one on the board that just has this amazing environmental remediation expertise. So you're looking how to help draw upon expertise of others to help inform decision-making. Can you just talk a little about how you're trying to tackle that? Because of course, at the same time, you're trying to make sure, get this repair made, get the wastewater flow going again. We've got a third-party investigation going on. Let's take a look at our CIP and what, if any, reordering or reprioritization do we have to make? And we've got a budget we've got to plan for, and how are we going to pay for all of this?
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a full plate.
Yeah, it's a lot. So actually, there are a lot of board members with a lot of expertise in environmental remediation. And Montgomery County is one of the jurisdictions that's been very vocal in asking very clear questions. I appreciate that we have the director of DOE on our board as well. I think the interesting part is that, so my understanding, HCMA is coordinating with FEMA and coordinating with other EPA and other federal stakeholders. So actually, my understanding is that DC Water hasn't been sort of the quarterback of determining the steps that are going to be taken with regards to remediation. And so that might be why you haven't heard directly from DC Water about what the plan is, because it is mostly, my understanding, being taken from them and managed by the federal government. So obviously DC Water has a role that they're playing, but there are a lot of federal stakeholders that have actually come in to help make the determinations and the decisions regarding remediation. So, recently in a board meeting, one of our board members from Maryland were asking a lot of questions about the remediation. And the answer was, we're not in charge of that piece, right? HCMA is, FEMA is, EPA is. There are a lot of people that are, but it's not DC Water's decision. So I think there is maybe a little bit of frustration also on the side of board members who aren't getting answers to those very questions that they want to know also. But we're also thankful to have the federal partners, right? Because there is an astronomical cost to this effort, right? And so to the extent DC ratepayers can be shielded from absorbing some of these costs, that's better for us. But I think that because we're so focused on the pipe repair, and that's what DC Water was the main quarterback in, they were very focused on that effort. The remediation piece was going on simultaneously, but because of the number of stakeholders and agencies involved, I think DC Water has less of a say in what is happening.
Okay. I think that I think there's a very strong concern, I share it, of understanding DC Water is absolutely going to be quarterbacking the repair, and the priority is getting that pipe fixed.
Yeah.
I don't think it's okay for DC Water to say, well, the impact on the river is just not my thing. That's someone else.
I don't think that they're saying that.
All right.
That's definitely not
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
But I do hear a fair amount, and I don't mean this at you personally. I just mean in terms of the
Yeah.
the way in which we're working on this from a DC water perspective, a little bit of that's going to be somebody else's job. HSEMA, I mean, the spill's in Maryland, not in DC. So HSEMA doesn't even have jurisdiction at the spill site from
Yeah.
environmental remediation.
Yeah.
It was DC Water as the signatory for the permit for the remediation. So
Yeah.
I think you can't be the one with the permit and also not be the quarterback. And all of that confusion
Yeah.
of who's on first, who's on second, who's calling the shots, I think adds to the what I feel like is a significant level of just, I don't trust what the process looks like. And I think that's an area that needs more focus. I'm grateful to hear some of the board members really asking and drilling down on some of those questions.
Yeah.
I think we need more of that. Obviously from the district standpoint, great to hear Montgomery County is asking that.
Yeah.
I'd ask our DC board members too, like, please drill down on
Yeah.
those questions too, because any environmental impact at that spill site, even though it's in Maryland, that water's coming south.
Absolutely.
yeah.
So it impacts our local businesses, it impacts my residents who live on the water.
Yep.
And I know you know all this. It
My
impacts your parents down north, right? So I love that because I know it's
Yeah.
close to you. So all of that is a reason why I definitely want to ask our DC board members
Mhm.
to partner up with Montgomery County and really help make sure we're asking those tough questions,
Yeah.
have that level. Because I do think it's in our interest here. I mean, there's an accountability of, while obviously the spill was not intentional, we can't pretend it didn't happen. So
Right.
it is on DC Water to help be a leader in this restoration. Welcome federal support in that. Welcome others. I don't necessarily trust the federal government right now, but I welcome if there are more resources coming in. That's a good thing. So we want to be able to bring that in and take advantage of it. So I would ask you both, or all three of you, as our DC representatives, to really partner up with your fellow board members on this. Really, please ask those tough questions.
Yeah.
In the same way, I know you're going to ask the tough questions
Yeah.
about how did the spill happen? How did the break happen? What were the repairs needed? How did we evaluate this? I need that environmental remediation to be just as important because it is all of our watch.
Yeah, we want to make sure that the information that we get from the federal side of the house, that we'll keep asking those questions and make sure that, you and the committee get the information of
Yeah.
how is it going, where is it going?
Okay, I appreciate that. Ms. Bott, you touched on this a little bit. Do you have the most tenure at this point on the board?
No.
Got to be close to it
I'm
though.
close. I'm
Yeah.
second.
All right.
Howard Gibbs has been serving
All right, fair. Mr.
significantly
Gibbs.
longer than me.
Okay.
But I'm the longest tenured woman on the board.
All right. Well, I think you kind of referenced though of
Yeah.
the longevity helps you have an amount of institutional knowledge that's important. Just want to see if you want to add a little more to that about how, whether it be this crisis or any other type of challenge, how have you felt your years of service on the board
Mhm.
has helped prepare and kind of arm you for
Yeah.
being resilient or asking the tough questions through tougher moments that sometimes a newer member may just hadn't gone through it before, so not quite sure where and how to push. Kind of,
Yeah.
we don't always have somebody who has this level of expertise and
Yeah.
length of service.
I think Howard and I really enjoy being able to, and do probably almost at every other board meeting, say, oh yeah, remember that time when such and such happened? This is just like that situation, or the last time this happened, this is what we did. And so it's actually been great to be on the board for so long and have seen, various leaders, right? So it's David now, but before David, there was a while when it was between George
Mhm.
and David, right? We had others that managed, and seeing everyone's different styles and what works and what is harder to work. And then to see over the course of DC Water's tenure, how it was and how it was managed before under George versus David, the organization has really blossomed during my tenure, and it has very much professionalized itself. The fact that we have a global reputation is pretty amazing. We have so many visitors that come from countries all around the world to tour the facilities because we are such a global leader in this, which I think is really positive for the District of Columbia, right? I think to be known at a global scale for being a wastewater treatment plant and having the most up-to-date technologies is amazing. And I think our ability to then send management overseas and around the country to speak on things that they are the experts in is really exciting, and brings back to Washington, D.C. that global influence piece that I think is really critical. So I do very often, alongside with Howard, remind board members about how things were dealt with before and why things have changed, what decisions we've made, on a pretty regular basis. So it's really nice,
I know.
actually.
I can definitely, I have witnessed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The knowledge that they both bring, but they do ask the tough questions. I'm always surprised at all the institutional knowledge that they bring behind. And it really has been a learning for me as I hear them speak about these different, when back in the days, this and that, but sometimes they even challenge each other. So I think that definitely those tough questions and those tough topics and are being asked.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
And well, Dr. Ortiz, let me ask you too, you're an alternate member, very engaged, obviously serving on several committees. When I think back to a year or so ago when you were first coming before the committee for that, the remainder of that term. Can you talk a little about what your experience has been, either where it's worked really well or where you found it challenging to be an alternate, of when you need to step up into being an alternate and serving in that capacity versus being an alternate board member who doesn't always have the same powers as a full principal board member? Just gonna have you, how you've helped navigate that over this past year or so.
Well, I'm glad my colleagues have treated me just not as an alternate, but just as a regular board member. They ask, they answer, they meet with me. The challenges I think sometimes is between the jurisdictions, dual or things like that, but really hasn't been that. It's been a learning experience, honestly, but I have never been treated as a second-class citizen, or when I have a question, I go to Mr. Gibbs or Mr. Jackson. So I think just the challenge of this.
It's because you sit on the other side.
It's
really.
okay. Yeah,
You're
I sit on the other
of the
side,
room.
but I hear it from them too. So, but I'm glad that I think we complement each other a lot, even when we agree to disagree, but it's always respectful and things.
I'd be concerned if the board was unanimous on every single issue.
Oh, no.
We need a healthy, that's a
Oh, no,
healthy
there's
thing.
always a debate.
Yeah. Mr. McConey, let me bring you into the conversation a little bit. You're wanting to join the board at a very challenging time. Can you talk about what is attractive about this board? Appreciate anybody's willingness to serve, so thank you for that. What makes the DC Water Board attractive to you in this moment?
Well, let me start by saying, water is critical to everything we do. And I've observed over the years the work that's been done to clean the Potomac. So not only do we have clean drinking water, but we actually can use it for recreational purposes, and how that has been a focus to shape economic development in the district and how vital that is. And one of my concerns overall is ensuring that we are resilient in how we look at these precious resources. So we need to protect the Potomac, not just for our use now, but for future generations. That is critically important. I've witnessed just in the federal government alone that when you don't pay attention to your infrastructure, even in our buildings downtown, how impactful that can be. When I was at the Labor Department, I got a call one morning because there was smoke coming out of our building downtown, the Perkins building, which doesn't make one comfortable when you're responsible for the building. And found out very quickly that the command center for the DC's tunnel systems by DDOT is integrated and literally built into our building. And in fact, in that building, the air intake that gets fresh air into the tunnel as vehicles are going down is part of our building. And what happened is we had a water leak in this ancient computer room that created the sparks that nearly shut down the tunnels for a while. And I was struck at how interconnected in the district, particularly where some of our infrastructure was federal infrastructure that was built before home rule and was built in very different circumstances, is connected. So having the opportunity to serve on the DC Water Board sort of extends both my passion and concern about the future use of this resource, but also my understanding just of what I saw as an individual of the importance of maintaining and paying attention to your infrastructure needs. Now, also, I have had experience. I'm one of the few, I think, at my level that served both as a deputy inspector general and on the other side, running federal programs. And I think that effective oversight is absolutely critical. And frankly, having some people who have general expertise coming in can bring a fresh set of eyes and fresh set of perspectives to issues that are being addressed by boards and other governance committees. So I very much applaud the independent investigation that's going on of what happened, the independent study. And at times in my careers, I've actually invited the Inspector General to take that sort of action just to make sure that we weren't missing anything. These are not gotcha moments. These are something bad happened, and we've got to make sure we avoid it in the future. I salute the employees of DC Water. You know, I understand that their quick efforts saved 1 billion gallons of contaminated water for hitting the Potomac and our waterways, which is great. And I think the emergency efforts that were taken were great. Now we need to make sure that we understand what happened so that we can try and find ways to ensure that we avoid this to the extent possible in the future. Frankly, I'm very honored to actually be sitting next to two people who are so deeply ingrained and understand how the organization operates, how DC Water operates. I'll look to them for their wisdom, suggestions, and guidance, but also part of what being a new member is a new set of eyes, a new set of perspectives, new questions that might be asked, particularly someone from the outside, I think gives you a new opportunity. Although I would hope, you know, and one of the good things about this board is with the alternate members, it does give you an opportunity to get steeped in. And if an opportunity exists for a non-alternate member, you're not walking in blind to something so very critical. So to a certain regard, that's a benefit. But of course, living in the district, I'm kind of used to having a voice without a vote. And it hasn't stopped me before, and it's not going to stop me now.
It's a great way to bring in statehood into that. I do think it's actually one of the things I've been really impressed with the DC Water Board is the role in which we've seen just really serious, competent, great people serving as alternates. And then as we've also had opportunities when a principal member maybe rolls off at some point, we have a whole deep bench of people that aren't learning fresh that are able to step right into that spot. And so I do think it's a very successful structure that has worked. So that's good to hear. Are there any, you talked a good bit about infrastructure, couldn't agree more. It may not be sexy. It's not going to hit the headlines until it does. Managing infrastructure is just a challenge. Are there any other big issues that you want to focus on as you tackle this? And obviously some of it you're going to learn as you get on the board, but as you jump into it.
Well, one thing I want to point out, I think the presidential declaration was very useful in this circumstance, not just for district and for ratepayers and taxpayers here in addressing the problem, but it sent a message to the entire country of the importance of looking at our water infrastructure in a very serious manner. Because while I understand this interceptor was planned for replacement, that could happen anywhere else at any time for things that we're just not aware of. And are, you know, looking at the amount of money that DC Water has to address some of the infrastructure needs, being able to prioritize the most important things and finding new ways and new technologies that can test those assumptions quickly so that if the board and the staff need to take a different direction to address more serious problems, that's important. So, you know, what I'm going to bring to the DC Water Board is my senior executive experience, the contacts, the work that I've done throughout a career of the federal government. I will focus on governance discipline. I've always done that, asking the tough questions in respectful ways, working with colleagues. I've already noted that I want to really focus on helping the DC Water staff be more sensitive to impacts when you turn off the water in a neighborhood without them knowing at about 10 o'clock at night, which happened 3 times in the last month in my own neighborhood. And I want to have a few helpful conversations about ways to avoid that. But I, look at myself as someone who could serve in any number of the committees, HR, LR, finance and budget, which I think is very important, audit, governance. Those are all areas where I think I would like to learn more about the board and its operations, where they need support, and then get involved in those committees, because I think that's also a wonderful way at the beginning of one's term to get fully integrated in the wide variety of issues that face any large organization like DC Water, or certainly one with such a critical mission to serve the public.
Well, you kind of anticipated the next question I was going to ask you, which is, as a ANC commissioner, you're on the front lines of managing when things maybe aren't going the way we wanted, or when communication didn't quite go the way that people need it. You gave a great example, obviously, and I appreciate all of our commissioners who, you just get paid way too much for that job as an ANC commissioner, and all the staff you have is
it's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. But really grateful for all of our commissioners, but that's got to give you a kind of a unique experience too, to help bring that expertise or experience into DC Water.
Yes. So one, I want to do a shout out right now to the staff who were very responsive to working with me on an issue on 16th Street. So we're having lead pipe remediation done, which again, we're all very excited about. We want to get rid of those pipes. However, I got an email from DC Water indicating that they were going to restart construction while we were still in the middle of the Snow Creek problem, particularly on 16th Street. So I emailed back and I said, okay, I'm not an expert in any of this. I'm not an engineer, but one, I don't know where you're going to put stuff. And two, are you going to get in the way of DPW, who's removing the snow, so that we can get back to normal business? They went back and forth, but finally came around and did the right thing and basically held off for a week or two to allow that other work to get done and allow the side streets to open up. And so I thought that was a very productive example that I'll share with them of what we need to do more of in terms of the town and gown relationships. Now, in our neighborhood in particular, we're facing, I think, 3 things all at the same time. One, we're just about to start the Piney Branch Tunnel, which I am very excited about, that wastewater storage capability that's going to be put there. And actually the location is good. However, the construction of that not only is going to disrupt traffic in 16th Street all the way up when the Piney Branch drive is closed for periods of time, but also just the fact that we're going to be digging and building a very deep tunnel right next to existing homes. And, I know they're not going to use TNT, but somehow they're going to have to break through all of that stuff. So not only is it important in situations like that to do pre and post to see if there was any damage to properties with that, but also very clear communication. You're going to hear things and feel things these hours, because this is when we're digging down. And really making sure that the neighborhood is aware of that. I think the challenge for me in our area, particularly where we're at 16th Street and Military Road, we seem to be at the crosshairs for a lot of improvements, which we're very excited about. But the timing of what DDOT's doing, what DPW doing is, and what DC Water is doing creates a lot of frustration within the community. And so we work very hard in our ANC to provide opportunities for people to clearly articulate what's going to happen and when, so that people understand it. But also we push back on a few things. For example, there's a green infrastructure permeable alley project going on in our neighborhood that's going to be on some of the same alleyways that touch areas where we're working on lead remediation. And so what we said is like, look, what specifically are you going to be doing? Because a lot of these residents park in the alleyway, and now we're moving their cars and everything onto the streets. We're also moving where trash pickup happens. So it's not, it's one thing just saying we're going to start on this date, but then you've got to step back. We need to make sure that WASA is really effectively coordinating with DPW so that all the different parts that serve all of those, that provide all those public services that we depend on, are coordinated to the extent possible. And I think, one of the superpowers I'll bring is, a customer on the street who can say, this is what my neighbors are seeing and feeling. This is what they're complaining to me about. And by the way, don't take it personally. They're excited about the outcomes, but it's how we navigate through the process in the meantime.
Yeah. I think that'll be invaluable. And I will say my experience, not dissimilar. when I have constituents who will reach out to me frustrated over communications or something on the front end that didn't go the way it was supposed to. And I have appreciated when I've reached out to DC Water, the team there has gone and, sometimes I've personally gone out to that person's home to go stand on their doorstep, apologize, and try to figure out how to make it right. So it's the front end side of that communication and coordination that's so necessary and needed. And I appreciate that I think it's going to be just a very valuable experience as a commissioner to be able to bring into that role. So I'm glad to hear it. Let me ask a question for all three of you. Just we always ask around potential conflicts. Everybody has had or is in, a professional career. Where have you seen? Are there any conflicts that you feel like you need to flag in this setting? Do you feel confident that should a conflict or potential conflict arise, you know how to navigate that correctly, either through your professional employer or career or with DC Water? Can you talk about potential conflicts? Who wants to go first, Ben?
I have none. And given the sensitive roles that I was in the government, all of my investments and everything were a matter of public record. And I don't have any contracts or business with the district at all. So nor with WASA. And if something did come up, because sometimes one never knows, I would obviously deconflict myself from any of those matters.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I've had very few conflicts arise. I'm often invited, because I am a CB business owner, to bid on contracts. And I always say that I do not do any work with DC Water. And so I have turned down numerous opportunities to do work. And I think in my tenure, there was only one time where I recused myself because I felt like I just felt uncomfortable. So I am very cognizant of it. I understand the process by which to do it. And I have no issues, if anything ever arises, to remove myself from whatever that issue might be.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't bid on anything. I was actually, one of my earlier concerns was being on the board of, Teatro La Luna, because they asked for grants from DC government for the theater, but I have nothing to do with the grant writing or how they get it. So, but if that were to come up, I'll definitely recuse myself. I used to be a federal employee, so everything about me is all over the place. Some people know more about me than I know about myself. But if I found myself in that situation, I'll definitely ask my colleagues and make sure, our legal department, to make sure that we're okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you all for that. Ms. Bott, you're the chair of the Water and Sewer Rate Committee, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going through that process with the budget and everything right now. In our DC Water Oversight hearing, we talked about kind of the both the conversations that they do and work with the Office of People's Counsel, just to make sure that they're following through with the engagement with OPC.
Yeah.
And then they go through the community outreach process. Even with all of that, it still is a fairly condensed time frame in terms of when it goes out to the public before the board has to vote on a final recommendation. Any thoughts you have around ways, having gone through it now a few times, of ways you would recommend either strengthening, improving that kind of community engagement or outreach? Are there any lessons learned you have that you want to share about the ways in which as many voices as possible are able to broaden to that consideration before the board ultimately acts?
Absolutely. So when I first joined the board, actually, that the outreach to the public happened in person, and DC Water would go to each ward and give a presentation, and it would be in person. And
I remember some of those. There was a popcorn machine in the back.
Yeah,
everything.
exactly right. And in some wards, we would get a tremendous turnout. And in other wards, we get nobody. And so we decided to make them virtual. And I think that was coming out of COVID, really. But what we found is that there is much more engagement when the meetings were virtual. And so I think that's what the plan has gone to, is to make them virtual, so that as many people as possible can attend and do provide their feedback. I always wish there was more engagement, right? Because I'm sure every one of us gets phone calls from friends who complain about their DC water bill. But obviously those friends never appear when we ask them to provide comments. And so I think the move to having meetings be virtual so that people can attend while at work, in their car, whatever it might be, in order to get maximum participation, I think is great. It is a fairly condensed timeline, but it's not unlike all the other things that pass through and you know, get published, and then you have to solicit feedback and everything else. Like, we still follow all of those same rules and guidelines. I think we've always listened to what OPC has to say. We meet with OPC. We have conversations with them. We respond to any questions that they put forth. I mean, the issue that I raised in my original testimony is it's hard. It is very hard to decide what to prioritize with limited funds. And it's really a push and a pull. And we struggle with it, and we have to make real decisions. I think one of the things that we requested this year, I requested 2 committee meetings ago, was that I wanted an affordability presentation in our rates committee meeting for April. So there was an affordability piece to the rate and budget presentation, but I didn't feel like it went deep enough. And so I asked staff to make sure that we had the presentation, and we will have one next month. And we talked about revisiting the rates and everything else in June and July, and other colleagues of mine on the board, Alex McPhail and Tony Giancola, also asked even in this month's meeting about the status of that presentation to make sure that we're going to stay on track for April. So I think we really focus on it, and we understand OPC's concerns. Obviously, they're looking at many utilities, not just DC Water. And we understand it. Like, we're all ratepayers too, sitting up there and asking, why are these rates going up? So it doesn't fall on deaf ears, and we really pay a lot of attention to it.
Yeah. I think all utility fees right now are a topic of conversation. I was curious if you can talk a little more, one of the things that I think the individual household rate and utility bills, I'm going to include all utilities, including water, is something we pay attention to. What we don't often hear as much are, frankly, from a lot of our local businesses and what the impact is for utilities. DC Water aside, I have the same conversation when we're talking about the electric bills. I absolutely believe we have ratepayers who are angry and frustrated at PEPCO bills that are way too high.
Yeah.
But our local businesses are having to absorb these huge costs. Your DC government is having to absorb these huge costs as well. So elevated rates impact all of us. How do you do some of the engagement around your business consumers? So your individual household ratepayers, they're not going to be afraid to fill up my inbox as well and let me know that they think they're paying too much.
Yeah.
But how do you do engagement, or is it a different type of engagement strategies when you're talking to some of our business stakeholders that are also high water users?
It's a great question. I don't know that it's a different form of engagement, to be honest. I think, and historically, I haven't seen business come out. I remember actually having met Kirsten the first time, because she was the head of AOBA, the Association of
Office
Apartment
apartments and office
Buildings.
buildings, yeah.
And it was the first time that I had met her, and she was really the only one for years that would come and testify and actually wanted to know the rate increases in advance. And that's actually a change that we made as partially as a result of her testimony and of others. Instead of having a 1-year rate increase, we now look at what is it going to be for 2 years, right? So it was like really good, positive feedback that she was able to provide that made sense for business. And I wish that business associations would come out and be engaged and would testify. Unfortunately, they don't.
I'll see what I can do to help out with that too. I mean, I think, for example, of our hotels,
Yeah.
they're going to be high water users.
Yeah.
Restaurants,
Yeah.
high water users. They're busy 24 hours a day, just like every other small business I know.
Yeah.
But these are large businesses. These are
Yeah.
anchors in the city. And I think whether it's a little more outreach or if I can be helpful to make a connection, I think their feedback would be helpful.
Yeah.
Maybe they kind of shrug their shoulders and just say, well, it's just a cost I got to absorb and I'll just figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel like that's what a lot of businesses feel is,
Yeah.
cost of food is rising, cost of
Mhm.
health insurance for your employees is everything is going up. And so I think DC Water is part of that, but everything is increasing and it's increasing for DC Water,
Yeah.
right? In order to cover the same number of employees and the same health insurance plans and everything else, the costs are higher. And so I think at least for businesses, there's an offset option, right? Because they also have the option of increasing their prices. When it comes to residents and ratepayers, it's really hard. And so that's where we really focus our efforts and we have the lifeline rate and we have the most affordability programs of any other water utility in the country. And so I think all of those are in our favor and we're constantly looking at them.
So one area that created a lot of concern, at least in my neighborhood, was the impervious surface measurements
Mhm.
work that was done.
Yes. Yeah.
And there was inadequate communication
Mhm.
Yes.
before that happened. And certainly that's one where what I heard was, look, my family has lived here for 40 years. We've not added one more inch of concrete anywhere. Why is my bill going up by this percentage? Now, I will say, I think DC Water's bills have not gone up as much as Pepco. I mean, electricity
That is
bill,
correct, yeah.
everyone saw all of that and it was jarring
Mm.
last year when we saw it. We got solar installed to try and, help us with future inflation in that area. DC Water's been better, but again, some of this is all timing too.
Mhm.
So people are seeing their rates going up. They're seeing other utility impacts which are affecting affordability. And then particularly our older residents are getting these letters saying that things are going to go up even more. So I think, the board's going to have to take a look at that and also for some of those issues, really help staff understand better ways to communicate and start building public education about some of those changes, which might indeed be necessary,
Mhm.
but shouldn't be just dropped on people.
I also think that the board was what was responsible for pulling that back in terms of timing, because we all got the letters
Yep.
and I mean, as people that attend meetings all the time, we were like, what is this, right? And our colleague, Alex McPhail was the first one to email and say, I got this letter and why? Like, why do I not know about this? What's happening? And the board pushed to have that pulled back because there wasn't adequate notice, education program. And to DC Water Management's credit, they immediately understood, agreed with us, and have made strides to correct that. So
Yeah.
I think that's where the board and management work in partnership, and it's really successful. So yes, all of us were in that same place.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed. Another topic that we won't solve tomorrow, but the
Yeah.
board obviously has a huge role in helping think through how we manage a solution. And that's, of course, our secondary source for water. I also serve as the vice chair of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and COG was a really great partner with DC Water and others thinking through, like, we need to start talking about it and not pretend it's state secret. It's a real issue. And if we're ever going to find the political will or the money to find a secondary source, we have to start really helping people understand what this means. And I saw, like, as we were watching the media help respond and navigate their responses through the Potomac Interceptor spill, some of them actually were able to start talking about, all right, why does this matter? Where's the location of the spill matter? All right, well, our water source is coming in above where the break happens, so that can help tell us our drinking water is safe to continue to drink. But what if this had happened above the break? What if? And I think it started to help people realize this is a big deal, actually. We really need to think through a strategy here. And so kind of curious to our existing board members, just kind of some of the steps you think you're taking, trying to help, again, keep that moving forward. Again, not going to pretend a solution is easy or that it's coming tomorrow, but how we're moving in that. And then to Mr. Marconi, as you're joining the board, how do you feel like you're up to date on the need for a secondary source, and any thoughts that you want to share that?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest learned learnings for me about a secondary source of water is something that is at every board meeting, at least the ones that we have, is discussed. I think we're looking to push, and exactly what you said, if this was below that break and now it's in the
Mhm.
forefront, and I think now is time to really push it again. If there's a time to do it, it's time to do it now.
Yeah.
I give David a lot of credit. This has been at the forefront of his mind for a very long time, and it has been discussed by multiple board chairs. And I think you're right. Now it's more out in the open, and we're talking about it, which is wonderful. Unfortunately, it took the Potomac Interceptor for me to hear it for the first time on WTOP. I'd never heard it talked about. And actually, I was really excited that the conversation is being had. I was excited to hear that the aqueduct is engaging and is talking about it. I think DC Water has been engaging for a very long time with the aqueduct. It is very critical. And I think, looking at what ways other water utilities have done this, I actually went to Dubai over winter because I really wanted to see what it is that they do. And I learned so much about cloud seeding and all sorts of things that other places do in terms of water. But I think, Pure Water DC and campaigns that we are rolling out about that option is really exciting. I think that a lot of jurisdictions use that as an option, and we need to really be serious about considering it, because I think some of the other options, the quarries and everything else, are super expensive and will take a really long time. And it is good to see that DC Water they've been working behind the scenes on this for a very long time. And I think last year and this year are the first times when it's been really public and really out in the open, and it's exciting. So I'm looking forward to where we go with it, and hopefully soon.
Yeah, I'm sure we're gonna get a lot of support for it now. If there's ever any time to get support for this second source, it's now.
To all our federal partners listening,
Yeah.
they should be excited about this
Absolutely.
and come to the table here. Mr. Marconi,
Well,
welcome your thoughts.
So climate change is occurring every day, which is affecting clean water availability everywhere. And, with our reliance solely on the Potomac, we're already at risk from something major happening that we can't anticipate. And my worry, and I think we need to be very aggressive and assertive moving forward, is after something happens in the public, and you see it, there's a response, the problem's fixed, that problem sort of fades away and people forget about it and other things become more important. For the district, for the 3 states that share this jurisdiction and share this precious resource, we've got to ensure that we do everything to keep it clean, but we also need to have a plan B, because there are things that could happen that we don't anticipate, don't understand, aren't expecting, aren't prepared for, that could literally cut off our water source. And that's a position you don't want to be in. And you just look at some of the natural disasters that have affected other communities around the country, where water has been affected even temporarily, the problems and challenges that's faced. So I think we need to use this as the beginning of a sustained discussion for our region about a plan B and a plan C so that we're ready and more resilient. Right now, we are not resilient in this area. And that's not a good place to be in, because if there's one thing I want to be resilient in, it's water, because I can't live without that. And the other thing is I like the air to be clean. And so those are 2 very critical things. And actually, as I was thinking about this appointment, became one of the things that I'm like, this is something that I want to champion. And make sure that people don't forget it and that it doesn't disappear and then it pops up again and we go, oh, why? We should have done something a long time ago. We've seen that. That happens in government all the time.
We know the problem, and we do have ideas about the solutions. It is going to take the political will to be able to actually change it. And I do hope, I don't think we solve it without the federal partnership,
Yes.
to bring money and resources and will to the table. And so making sure that they're a part of that, regardless of administrations, the federal government has a very keen interest in making sure that the capital city has water.
Yeah.
Being the seat of government has its advantages
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
and that is one of them.
Yes, and we need to motivate them properly for this. Yes. Just somewhat relatedly, obviously the aqueduct, the board had taken an action to have DC Water explore what it would look like to be able to actually have the aqueduct. I think it makes a lot of sense. The questions I would have is, how does the board evaluating DC Water's capacity and ability should any type of arrangement work to assume such a major operation and infrastructure project?
So I think that's the whole point of allowing DC Water to explore the idea. That we don't have answers for that yet. I'm sure David does in his mind about how he would.
He was very confident in
he
the
would-
oversight question. When I
Yeah.
asked him, I said, he's like, we got this tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely, I don't doubt that the capacity could be built.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure, how's the board, sounds like that's what you're answering for me here is
Mhm.
you're helping evaluate
Yeah.
Right.
what that would look like, not the sale could happen next week.
I mean, it's, the conversations on our board are very interesting about that topic, because it's multi-jurisdictional again,
Yeah.
right? I think there are parts of our board that believe very strongly that it could happen tomorrow and would welcome that. And I think that there are other parts of our board that would be concerned if suddenly it was all turned over to DC Water when their jurisdictions, water utilities are also ratepayers and part of the aqueduct. So I think the purpose in giving DC Water the ability to explore it was to make sure that all questions get answered, and that all board members are making decisions from the same place and the same amount of knowledge. I do think that when it comes time to make that decision and to have those kinds of votes, that again, we have to all wear our DC Water hats.
Yes.
Right. And that's challenging because it may require some board members to potentially recuse themselves of being able to vote on that topic if they can't put their DC Water hat on.
Yeah. Well, and I think my interest is a little bit what I think you described. It's not necessarily how do the dynamics of the board work out over whose stakeholder is whose. I want a board that's evaluating, do we have the capacity?
Yeah.
What would it look like for us to invest to build the capacity
Yep.
to be able to have this type of operation?
Absolutely.
And so kind of your comment about fiduciary responsibility as a board member, can you do this? How would you do it? Has to be answered before it's a should you do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and it's nice because neighboring jurisdictions have held us very accountable
Mhm.
and again, have been very vocal about the questions and concerns that they have, right? And that's what makes our board so valuable. We have disagreements and there's healthy discourse and debate and, solutions will arrive from that healthy discourse and debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
They're lively debates.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to start wrapping up. Were there any other comments that you wanted to share for your nomination that you felt like we didn't touch on today? All right.
You're very thorough.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I said it wasn't an oversight hearing, but we covered a lot of ground, so I
Yes.
appreciate it. Well, let me say, I appreciate both for our returning members, grateful for your service. It is no small amount of time and effort and energy that you put into serving on the board. So really appreciate you doing that and being willing to do it again. And of course, to anybody who wants to join the board, grateful for the willingness to do that. And obviously, with both your career on the federal public service side, the ANC commissioner, local service side, I'd have no doubts around a deep commitment to public service and understanding the roles and responsibilities there. And so I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
So this is going to conclude the committee's public roundtable on proposed resolutions 26-482, 483, 485, 486, and 487. I want to thank our nominees for your testimony. The record for today's roundtable will close on Monday, March 23rd, 2026. And you can submit written testimony through the council's hearing management system at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. Until then, the next scheduled meeting of the committee is on Thursday, March 26th, 2026. when the committee will hold a public hearing on 6 bills. Bear with me for a second while I read them all out. Bill 26-105, the Improving Tenant Access to Water Bills Amendment Act of 2025. I know you'll all be interested in that one. Bill 26-124, the Utility Disconnections Protection Act of 2025. Probably care about that one too. Bill 26-243, the Automatic Enrollment and Utility Affordability Programs Act of 2025. Bill 26-443, DC Water Billing and Disconnection Modernization Amendment Act of 2025. Hopefully you're picking up on the theme. Bill 26-595, the Transparent Rates and Utility Expenses Amendment Act of 2026. And Bill 26-602, the Guiding Renewable Interconnection and Distribution Amendment Act of 2026, also known as the GRID Act of 2026. You can sign up to testify at the hearing using the council's hearing management system until the close of business on Monday, March 23rd for that hearing. There being no further business before the committee, the time is now 2:32 p.m. and this public roundtable of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.